I just want to say my audience knows I confessed. A couple of months ago, Dr. Jayne Morgan, I had what I now know to be my first hot flash. And let me just
Oh,
tell you, sis, I about near died because it was on air. I was live on air. I was talking to an amazing person. Shout out to you, Quante Cruz. She's one of the representatives from Arizona. She knows this because I shared this with her at CBC. But I literally, Dr. Jayne Morgan, I felt it happen. I had never felt this before. It was the weirdest thing, and I thought I was dying because I didn't know it was happening. And so I was like, okay, I have to lay down. I turned off my camera. I was streaming from home. I turned off my camera, and I was like, I shouldn't turn off my camera because if I die, nobody's gonna know. Amina's not gonna know. I'm here in the house by myself. What is happening? And then after it went away, I was like, was that a flash? And yes. I mean, when I'm telling you, and I'm gonna be graphic in this because if y'all can regulate my vagina, then you might as well understand all the other things that are happening with my body. When I say I had sweat in my neck rolls, like I mean, Dr. J. Morgan, it was everywhere, and that's why I thought I was dying. I was like, I've never sweat on my neck before. It was
you're
crazy.
on fire from the inside.
Yes, from the
Yes.
inside out. And
Um,
then my brain started getting woozy. It was like, am I passing out? I literally, at one point, I just laid on the table. I just had to lay out, bring the microphone down. I'm like, I'm laying on the table. I was like, okay, I'm not dead. I didn't die. But that was my introduction to what I now know to be perimenopause.
yes.
And I'm in my late 40s. I thought, I'm just skirting on by, like, bebop a doo bop a boo. And so I'm really grateful that today you are here to talk with us about menopause because I thought I knew things. I'm very in tune with my body, but clearly I was not that in tune.
And there may be things that have been happening the last 10 years that you're not associating with perimenopause because nobody talks about them, including doctors. So your first introduction is having this big hot flash all of a sudden,
Yes.
when actually there maybe were subtle signs along the way that people don't talk about. So, there's a burning tongue, itchy
Oh.
ears,
Oh.
deodorants that suddenly aren't working anymore. You're having to wash and change your shirts more often.
Oh, what
Frozen
about our night
shoulder,
sweats?
night
I've been
sweat.
having night sweats I didn't know what it was. I was like, Brian got the heat up too high in this
Right.
house.
That's
That's why I
right.
love
Night
cozier
sweat,
sheets.
frozen shoulders, aching joints. These are all
Wow.
the brain fog. And so it looks like you had a little brain fog as a part of the hot flash as
Yes.
well.
Oh
Um,
my God. Oh
yeah.
my God. Yeah. And so I'm really glad that this is our topic today because, usually when we're talking about menopause, it's jokes and giggles. And even though there's an entire population of women who have experienced this, who know this, we don't make talking about it very easy because there's such a stigma behind this topic. I'm like, why is this stigmatized? All of us have to go through it, but there really is this stigma. And can you talk to us a little bit about how that stigma makes it difficult for us to have educational conversations about it, makes it difficult for doctors to raise it? Where did this stigma, why is this the thing for us
Right.
still?
Why don't we talk about it? There's a silence around it. And, we learn even in school, we have, health classes, at least, you know, the previous schools before everything started being removed, you would
Right.
take classes on health and learn about sex education, but nobody ever teaches you about menopause. Your mother
Right.
talks to you about your period, but they don't ever talk to you about when your period stops. And
Right.
why is it that's so closeted? And one of the reasons that I talk about it a lot is because we now know that the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause are linked to heart disease. And so
Oh.
we have to begin to talk about it. And Black women, on average, have more severe hot flashes. They last for longer periods of time. We have more of them. And hot flashes as well are related to heart disease, the duration and the
Wow.
severity, which means our risk of heart disease can be greater than that of white women. And then, sleeplessness, insomnia, very common symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. You sleep less and less and less, or you
Mm.
can fall asleep, but you can't stay asleep. You have these awakenings,
Yes.
1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. These are all symptoms of perimenopause and are also related to heart disease. We know that sleep duration and quality of at least 5 hours per night decreases your risk of heart disease. And if you are
Mm.
not getting that, your risk of heart disease increases. And insomnia doesn't mean that you don't sleep. It means that Sometimes you have difficulty falling asleep, or once you fall asleep, you are awakened in the middle of the night, or you're awakened 2 or 3 times, so you just don't get that restful sleep. That
Yeah.
increases your risk of heart disease. In
Mm.
addition, blood
Wow.
pressure starts to increase because your vessels are stiffening because of that lack of estrogen. Cholesterol levels increase. So you see where I'm going with this, where menopause and perimenopause are not ha ha ha. As a cardiologist, I'm trying to get people to understand this is when your risk of heart disease begins
Mm.
to really increase. And you have to take it seriously. You need to make certain your doctor is taking it seriously as well.
So, what is happening physiologically when we're going through menopause? Since I'm assuming none of y'all had this included in your sex ed class, because Lord knows I certainly did not. All I know is it's basically we're about to stop having a menstrual cycle. But what's happening physiologically with us when this is going on?
So the definition of menopause, I want to level set for everyone, is
Yep.
when you have gone 1 full year without having a period. That is officially menopause. Perimenopause are those 10 or 15 years before then when your estrogen
10
level
or 15
10
years I
to
got to deal
15
with
years
this?
ahead of time. And it doesn't mean that you're having symptoms, but you're going through perimenopause because your estrogen levels are starting to drop and decrease. And the rate at which they drop and the pattern at which they drop can be different for everyone. It can be a slow decline for some,
Um,
others can be up and down and eventually taper off. Some can stay high for long periods of time and then drop suddenly at the end. So it's all different and it will relate to the types of symptoms that you experience. But really, what it is denoting is, I hate this term, I've got to think of another term. The medical term is ovarian failure. And I'm also fighting terminology
Jeez.
in our profession as well. So as the ovaries began to fail is the word. I just don't like that word. So
Mm.
let's just, as you get older, that those estrogen levels, that's where estrogen is related then to those ovaries. Um, Estrogen levels decrease and you start to have these symptoms. Those
Mm.
symptoms are related though to heart disease. So as you develop symptoms, you need to start to think about as well. Oh, my risk of heart disease and stroke are increasing now. I
Wow.
need to make certain I'm monitoring my blood pressure very, very closely and being treated to goal, meaning my blood pressure should be 120 over 80 or less. I'm not going to tolerate 130 or
Mm.
130 over 85. It has to be 120 over 80. I need to make certain that I am looking at my cholesterol and taking medications to lower it. And so all of these are things that we need to think about. But the reason is our estrogen level and progesterone as well, but it's primarily the estrogen that's increasing your risk of heart disease. And this is what is happening to us as we transition through this phase. And this is actually a very we should embrace this phase of our life. It is the beginning of freedom in many ways, and we can
Huh.
step into our own. And instead of women stepping back after 40 or 50, oh, we don't really have any more value to society. Actually, I have found as women have gotten older, we're coming more and more and more into our power with our
Mm.
experiences and our knowledge and what we are going to
Okay.
contribute to society. And so, later really is greater. And this is when the children have grown. We have moved on. We've developed all of our life experiences, our job experiences, and now can really contribute. And so we should not allow menopause and the stigma around menopause to
Yeah.
keep us closeted when really
Mm.
we are blossoming and we really are in our full potential for contribution to a number of things, not only to society, but to ourselves as well.
I love everything about what you just said. So take that, elected officials who think postmenopausal women are only good enough to watch your children and grandchildren, somebody else's kids. Although you kind of threw me with that 10 to 15 years, Dr. Morgan, because my thinking was, okay, well, if it's having perimenopausal, then maybe I'll be in menopause by next year. So in my calendar, I'm like, okay, well, this will be good
Oh,
because I'm
no,
like,
no, no.
yeah, apparently
No,
not.
this may go on for 10 to 15 years. And here's something that people don't understand. Perimenopause means that you are approaching menopause, but you're still fertile and you can still get pregnant. So you can have hot flashes and get pregnant. So
Child, the devil is a liar. Ooh,
the
Jesus.
entire spectrum, because you're still ovulating, you're still having periods, and even as they become more and more irregular, you still have the potential. It's less, but you still have the
Mm.
potential to have a pregnancy, even though you're also having symptoms of menopause. So that's the irony in the entire thing. So I don't want anybody listening to say, oh, I'm having hot flashes now, so I can just get off my birth control.
Nope.
Probably
Listen.
not, right?
Mm-mm. I
So
talked to
not
my doctor last year. I was like, listen, I'm about due for my next. So I was like, so me and this IUD, we go together and we've never gonna be apart. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna know when menopause has actually happened because me and this IUD go together so hard. I'm not giving up my birth control because I have a lot of friends who are now my age and older, first time pregnancies or pregnancy, they have children in college and now they are like walking around signing up for baby registries, and yeah.
Yeah, and and it's not as common, as women get older and older, you do have fewer and fewer and fewer eggs. And so that's why it can be more difficult to get
Mm,
pregnant after the age of 40, after the age of 45, but it certainly can happen.
wow.
And so don't think that it won't happen. You still are ovulating, you still are fertile, you can still get pregnant and be having symptoms of perimenopause at the same time.
One day, me and God gonna have a conversation. When I make it back to the ancestral world, we're gonna have to talk about some things. Like there were choices that were made here,
Right.
Lord. I just need to understand why. So you mentioned some of the distinguishing factors. All of us are experiencing it, and largely speaking, broadly speaking. But you did mention that there were some things that were specific to Black women,
Right.
and from what I understand, African American women, as you mentioned, tend to experience it earlier than other women, which is
Uh-huh.
another way of increasing our cardiovascular potential when it comes to issues. And
That's the
you're
connection.
a you're our resident cardiologist, our resident cardiology expert. So, can you talk with us about the risks and what women should be looking out for? Are there things we should be asking our gynecologists and primary care physicians as we're in what is, my children have said, "Mom, you're middle age," and I was like, "Am I? I think I am. Yes, yes, I am." So, so what should I be
And
talking
I
about with my
am
gyne?
at the peak of my power as well, children.
Oh,
So,
yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that.
ready.
Okay, peak of my power. I'm writing it down. Mommy is at peak of her power. Okay, so what should I be talking about? Because these kids have comebacks quicker than mine. What
Right.
should I be talking about with my gynecologist and my primary care physician when it comes to what's happening with my body right now?
And not only those physicians, any physician that you see for the rest of your life, you
Oh.
should be providing your obstetric history, meaning your pregnancy history. It doesn't just end with your OBGYN, your obstetrician gynecologist, and when you stop having children, then you never talk about it again. And here is why. Because any challenges or complications that you had during any of your pregnancies that may
Mm-hmm.
have caused gestational diabetes or
Oops.
gestational hypertension, or you may have heard terms like preeclampsia or any of these kinds of complications. Unfortunately, if you were diagnosed with gestational diabetes, your risk of heart disease is increased for the next 25 years
That was
after
me.
the delivery of that baby.
Mm.
If you were diagnosed with gestational hypertension, your risk of heart disease will be twice that of a woman who was not diagnosed. So
Wow.
when you see your physicians for the rest of your life, if they are not asking, you should volunteer as that physician before that physician leaves the room. Hey, would you like to know my obstetric history? Not because
Mm.
they'll be delivering any of your babies, because it will guide them on how they need to manage you and whether or not you need a cardiology referral, whether or not they need to be more aggressive in risk
Wow.
modifying behaviors, losing weight. We need to be more aggressive with this because
Mhm.
your risk is higher. We need to really intervene if you are smoking cigarettes. We need to make certain that your diabetes is always controlled. We need to check your cholesterol more regularly. Your obstetric history can help to guide those decisions, and doctors don't even know for the most part to ask that. We are trying to incorporate this now into medical training and into fellowship training. So you may even be a step ahead of your doctor in mentioning it, but make sure you bring it up because it would trigger, aha, I should be asking this because it
Mm.
is relevant and it is important. And Black women, unfortunately, have the highest risk of developing gestational diabetes gestational hypertension. All that means is blood pressure while you're pregnant, diabetes while you're pregnant, kidney
Mm,
disease while you're pregnant. And here's the rub on that. Black women who are born in the United States of America, who are native to this country, are the ones with the highest risk of these pregnancy complications. Black women who are born outside of this country do not have that risk of complications. It's
ooh,
not all Black women. It is very specific to
mm,
African Americans born on this American soil. So there is something to that. There's something to
mm,
epigenetics,
yeah,
generational trauma, ongoing high effort coping in a race-based society
mm,
during your pregnancy, before your pregnancy, after your pregnancy, that women who are born outside of this country of the same race don't
wow.
experience and they don't have those complications.
866-801-8255, 866-801 talk is the number. I remember getting a gestational diabetes diagnosis with my daughter, and I was so dumb, Dr. Jayne Morgan. I was like, I'm skinny, I can't have diabetes. And they were like, ma'am, you clearly need more education, which is how just because you book smart don't mean you got common sense. That was a non-commonsensical comment for me to make, but it also shows how ignorant I was to all of these ways that my body was signaling something to me. And one of the things that
Common
we
sense. You would
common
think that. That's common sense. That's good common sense. Like
I'm
what I know
skinny.
about diabetes is that you're overweight and you're because this is what we tell people. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it can happen to all of us. And another thing that can happen to all of us is we have our own calendars and our own physiological calendars. And there are some women who go through menopause earlier in life and some who go through it later. But let's talk about the difference between early menopause, premature menopause, and do we know what is actually impacting an early onset for menopause and what's considered early?
Yeah. So early menopause can be impacted by a number of things, genetics, family history, also obesity. You tend to go into menopause a little bit earlier. On the other hand, you tend to start menses, you start your periods a little bit earlier
Mm,
as well. And so these can all be factors, including smoking and something that we call weathering. So the stress
ooh,
of um of 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 the constant navigation of a race and gender biased society, and you are the double bias, and you
mm,
have to navigate both gender and race that also is called the weathering effect. Just like it says,
yeah.
weathering, like the side of a house just gets worn down over time with the constant rain, the sun, the snow. You're every season you've got to deal with it, you've got to manage it, and it just goes on from season to season to season to season, is never ending, and that house weathers over time. And if it is not reconstituted and rebuilt and managed, which Black women are not. We just continue. Our society doesn't really change, or changes in such small amounts that it's very hard for us to measure. That's the weathering effect. And because of that, we also go into menopause earlier, which means it increases our risk of heart disease and stroke that much earlier.
Wow. We're getting a couple of questions from our online audience. I see one from Paris Carmel 77 who says she has a question as a woman over 55 years old who has a full hysterectomy and has never experienced a hot flash. She's wondering, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing or is it a signal of something that she should be aware of? What would you say to someone with that sort of profile?
Okay, so not knowing your medical history, I don't know what you mean by hysterectomy, if you just had your uterus out, if you had uterus and ovary. So I'm going
Mm,
to answer the question as if you are perfectly healthy and you had your uterus and your ovaries removed. Generally, when people have their ovaries removed, you go into that's called premature menopause,
mm,
because your ovaries are what's maintaining that estrogen level. So
wow.
maybe if you didn't have symptoms, your ovaries were left, and maybe you're one of the lucky women who just didn't experience the symptoms of menopause as you were going through it. But let me just say this. The deeper I get into this, I just think there are women like you that don't actually exist. What I think is that we just don't know what the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause are. We think they're just hot flashes and night sweats. And
Hmm.
we don't think about things like, oh, a burning tongue or itching ears or um your body starts to smell, you're having difficulty managing your deodorants or your body odor. Your bones are starting to hurt a little bit more, you seem to be stiffer when you're moving. These are all kinds of things that and there is a long list, frozen shoulder, the deeper I get into this, I think women do have symptoms, we just aren't taught what
Wow.
they are and what they mean, including vertigo, you're feeling dizzy, palpitations. All of
Hmm.
these can be symptoms of perimenopause, and especially women who are having palpitations during these perimenopausal years, 35 to 60. See your cardiologist. And if your workup is negative, then you probably need to see a menopause specialist because it may be that it's related to the irregularity of your hormones and your hormones dropping. Palpitations are a common symptom. So the more I get into this, I'm going to
Yeah.
challenge you on whether or not you have symptoms or whether or not you just had symptoms that you didn't relate to
Hmm.
perimenopause and menopause, and your physicians didn't either.
Mm, okay, so that I'm glad that that question came up because that sort of answered my subsequent question about surgical menopause. Because
Mhm.
if you are having a total hysterectomy, that is removing your ovaries, from what I understand from what you just said, that really is one of the triggers for entering this whole cycle. But there's a
And
lot
it's
of
not the
questions.
practice that is done anymore because of that. It used to be that the ovaries would be removed. Now, generally, you will remove your uterus. I'm talking high level general. I do not know anybody's specific medical condition, but
Right,
generally,
right.
you would remove the uterus and leave the ovary because of that recognition now of the ovaries providing
Mm.
protection for the heart for the woman.
Wow. Okay. So this idea of hormone replacement therapy. I know there's a lot of pros, a lot of cons. I don't know what any of the pros or the cons are. And is this something that for people who are experiencing menopause at a younger age should consider as well, hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, everybody should have the benefit of having this conversation. Doesn't mean that it's right for you, but should have the benefit of having the conversation about what are the pros and cons of having your estrogen replaced or estrogen and progesterone. If you still have a uterus, you would need both of those hormones. If your
Hmm.
uterus is out, meaning you had a hysterectomy, you only need the estrogen. And what is that dose and what is the route? It can be given orally, it can be given as a patch, it can be given as a cream, it can be given as a spray, all kinds of different things. And whether or not that's right for you, it may not be right for everyone or for everybody, but everybody should have the benefit of having this conversation because estrogen levels decreasing increases your risk of heart disease. And you need to know what your risk is, what your family history is, and then and what your lifestyle choices that might increase your risk may be as well, and then make a decision about whether this is a right choice for you. But I do think that every woman deserves the benefit of having this conversation with their doctors and not just saying, no, 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 I'm never going to put hormones into my body. That is fine, but make a fully informed decision
Mm.
before you make a decision because women are not all breast, uterus, and ovaries. We're also hearts, we're also brains,
Yeah.
and estrogen improves that brain function, your heart function, your bone function. It still
Mm.
may not be the right choice for you, but get the information. It's
Right.
just like when I talk about COVID. The vaccines may not be right for you, but I'm here to give you information so
Right.
you can make a decision that's right for you. Whatever
That's
your
right.
decision is, but have all the information first.
Hmm.
So
We
that
have a
way.
question from Angela in Texas, a first time caller. Angela, thank you so much for calling. What is your question for Dr. Jayne Morgan today?
Good morning, Dr. Morgan. Good morning, Lurie. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
My question is, I just turned 54 in September, and I had also had my first abnormal pap smear. And they told me that they think it may be due to being in menopause. And so I'm just wanting to know, could that be the case, or should I be worried? I'm worried because even though they said I've had an abnormal pap smear and all my other ones have been normal, that I should just wait another 3 years to get another test. And I'm just like, what? I have to sit with this for 3 years, having an abnormal pap? So I'm just curious, is what she's saying about being in menopause. I've been in menopause since I was 46, and I'm 54 now.
Okay, so listen to me very carefully. An abnormal pap smear is an abnormal pap smear, no matter what stage of life that you are in. You need to get follow-up for that. If your physician is asking you to wait 3 years, you need to get a second opinion and get that second opinion immediately. I don't know your whole history, so I'm talking to you from one little slice. So, but an abnormal pap smear, regardless of what phase of life you're in, is still abnormal. And the point of doing a pap smear is to decrease the risk of cervical cancer and certainly to decrease any morbidity or mortality from cervical cancer, which is caused by the human papilloma vaccine. I mean, the human papilloma virus. So if you haven't been vaccinated against that as well, and your partner hasn't been vaccinated, then it may be that you have this virus. So I may be getting too deep into it. Here's the takeaway. Make certain that you see someone about your abnormal pap smear. And if your physician isn't responding, see another physician and get a second opinion. What your first physician said may be right. I do not have your history, but I do know that abnormal pap smears are very serious. We should take them very seriously, and you need to follow up with someone else
Oh,
soon.
soon. So Angela, once you are able to follow up, feel free to give us a call back and let us know, if you so choose. But I'm really glad, Dr. Morgan, that she was able to get that question answered, because and I'm glad. I like what you said. Abnormal pap smear is abnormal pap smear, regardless of what phase of life you're in. So waiting 3 years to let's just see how it go. That to me just from my gut with no medical knowledge feels like that's weird. So I'm really glad she was able to get that
And
question
that's a little odd. And I'm always concerned about healthcare and information as well that minority populations and Black females are getting. So please get a second opinion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm not a practicing gynecologist. I'm a cardiologist. My recommendation to you would be to get a second opinion on that.
Thank you for that. Dr. Morgan, we are always grateful when you join us. And I feel like we knocked it out the park, because we've had you on for the past couple of weeks and just been able to really help us to gain some continuity with some of these topics. And it's helpful to have a cardiologist who knows what she's talking about to answer all of these questions. And what I love is that I'm now much more clear on how the heart is so interconnected to so many other things. I never would have, with my lack of complete non-medical knowledge would never have connected cardiology and heart health to menopause. And so I'm so grateful for you being able to take that approach with us. Before we go, I know that there's another edition of Stairwell Chronicles that should be coming up. Where can folks follow you? Where can they get the next edition of the Stairwell Chronicles? In addition to finding out what you said before in this series, talk to us about the way that folks can connect with you further.
Yeah, please follow me. You can follow me on Instagram, Dr. Jayne Morgan. And there's a Y in my first name, JayneMorgan. So Dr. just DR. I produce my Stairwell Chronicles every Wednesday. I'll give you just a little bit of a nugget, 60 seconds or less, about something that's easy to digest and understand that helps you in your life manage your health. Feel free to ask questions. I might just create a Stairwell Chronicle to answer your question, because if you have the question, somebody else may have the question as well. I'm also on X and Threads if you'd like to follow me there, and LinkedIn as well, Jayne Morgan, MD.